Hello, second graders, and welcome to the second part of our math lesson for today. Again, we are doing lesson 8.9, the final lesson in chapter 8, which is called Display Measurement Data. And we were asking ourselves the essential question, how can a line plot be used to show measurement data? So in the video that we watched last, we actually learned kind of what a line plot is. And it's just like a graph that helps you kind of organize all of the measurements that you do of a certain object. So if you're measuring the different sizes of different books, then you can use a line plot to kind of organize which books you found to be 5 inches, which ones were 6 inches, 7 inches, whatever your measurements are. So this video is just going to go over some examples on how to actually use a plot line. Please try to do your best to ignore this little logo thing over here. I'm going to do my best to kind of ignore it as I'm teaching, so try your best to just kind of ignore that. I think I have to get a new version of Smart Notebook or start teaching the math lessons on a different program, but just for today, just try to do your best to ignore that. So the first example that we're going to be working with, it kind of just shows us a little bit about what a line plot is. So a line plot is a way to show data. On this line plot, each X stands for the length of one paintbrush in inches. So based on the title of this line plot, we know that this person is organizing data about the lengths of paintbrushes in inches. So they must have measured a bunch of different paintbrushes, found different lengths for each one, and then used X's to kind of represent which paintbrushes were which number of inches. So when we have a line plot, we ask ourselves in this example specifically, how many paintbrushes are just 6 inches long? So if we wanted to find that out, we would look on the line plot. So the numbers on the line plot are always the inches or the length of whatever it is you're measuring. The X's are going to be how many of those objects you found to be each length. Okay, so to find how many are 6 inches long, we would go on the line plot and we would look for the 6, which represents the length of the paintbrushes. So these paintbrushes here are 6 inches long, and then we see how many X's there are. So in this case, there are 2. So there are two paintbrushes that are 6 inches long. The other question says, how many different paintbrushes are shown in this data? So when it's saying how many different paintbrushes are shown, we want to count all of the paintbrushes that we recorded on our line plot. So that's just going to be counting all of the X's. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So there were 9 different paintbrushes in this data. Okay. So it says use an inch ruler, measure and record the lengths of 5 books in inches. So I kind of went ahead and did that for us already because it would just be hard to do that for this lesson. So I measured a couple of books with an inch ruler that I have at my house, and these were some of the results. So the first book was 5 inches, the second was 4 inches, the third book was 6 inches, the fourth book was 5 inches, and the fifth book was 7 inches. So I went ahead and I measured some books, and now what we're going to do is we're going to take my data that I used and we're going to make a line plot. So first of all, we have to write a title for the line plot, right? So if you go back to this one real quick, you see that the title here was lengths of paintbrushes in inches. So my title for my line plot is going to be length of books in inches. Okay? So that's going to be my title for my graph. And again, I'm sorry that there's a little logo thing there, but we're just going to do our best. So length of books in inches. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to then write the numbers and draw the X's on my line plot to kind of organize my data. So when you're doing a line plot, you always want to find the smallest number first. So in this case, if you look at my data, the smallest book I found was 4 inches long. So that's what I'm going to start with. I'm going to start my line plot with 4 inches, and then I'm going to add the rest of the numbers. So 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. All right, so now I have my line plot set up. Now I'm going to use the X's to organize my data. So the first book was 5 inches. So I'm going to take one X and I'm going to move it right above the 5 mark there. Okay, my second book was 4 inches. So I'm going to take another X and I'm going to put it right there. My third book was 6 inches. So I'm going to move one there. My fourth book was 5 inches, so I'm going to put another X above the first X I put there. And then my fifth book was 7 inches, so I'm going to put an X right there. And that's all you really have to do to make your line plot. And then once you make your line plot, then you might be able to answer certain questions about your data. So for example, one question might be, how many books were 5 inches? So you would look at your line plot, look at the number 5, and you can see that there's 2 X's there. So that means that there were 2 books that were 5 inches. You might get asked a question of what book was the shortest length in inches, and you can say 4 because 4 is the smallest number we have on our line plot. So there's a lot of different questions that you can answer when using a line plot in math. So let's try this one. It says use the data in this list to complete the line plot. So we have a bunch of data right here about the lengths of ribbons. So our title might be lengths of ribbons in inches. Okay? So that's our title of our graph. Now what we do is we start by finding the smallest number in our data. So it looks like the smallest number here is 5 inches. So we're going to make our line plot starting with 5. So 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use X's to make and organize our data. So the first ribbon was 6 inches long. So we're going to take an X and we're going to put it right above the 6. The next one was 5 inches. So we're going to take another X and move it to 5 inches. The next ribbon was 8 inches. So we're going to put this one right above the 8. And then we have one that was 7 inches. And then we have another one that was 6 inches, just like that. Okay, and that's how you use a line plot and you organize your data with a line plot. Very, very simple once you learn the steps on what to do to get it set up. So for this problem, it says, suppose there were 2 more ribbons that were each 7 inches long. How would you change the line plot above to include this data? I'm going to give you about maybe 5-10 seconds to think about how would we be able to add this information into our line plot. We want to add 2 more ribbons that are 7 inches long. So take a few seconds and think about what would we do to show this information in our line plot. Okay, so what you're probably thinking is to show 2 more ribbons that are 7 inches long, we can take 2 more X's and put them right above the 7 mark on our line plot. So I'm going to do that now. So I added the first one and I'm going to add 2 more. So now the number of objects or ribbons that are 7 inches long has changed. It went from 1 to now we have 3. Okay, so what you can say is when they ask you how would you change the line plot above to include this data, something that you can say is I can place 2 more X's above the 7 on the line plot, because that's exactly what we did, and that's how we can change the line plot to include information. This works really well when you either like you make a mistake, or sometimes you might have to add more information to your line plot. So that's what you can do. So like, let's say you measured a ribbon that was 7 inches long, and that was the only one that was 7 inches long. But then later on, you also measured 2 more ribbons that were 7 inches long. So then you can just add on to your line plot whenever you get new information. So that's a really good way too of organizing information and data in a line plot. You can organize measurements from whenever you measure objects into your line plot. All right, and so then the last question asks, how many leaves are 4 inches long? So look at your options for A, B, C, and D. Look at the line plot that's over here, and kind of think to yourself, how many leaves are 4 inches long? How would you be able to tell how many leaves are 4 inches long? I'm going to give you about 10 seconds to go ahead and think about that for a second. Okay, so to find out how many leaves are 4 inches long, we would look at the number 4 on our line plot, and then we would count all of the X's that are above the number 4. So we have 1, 2, 3. And so our answer should be B, 3. Okay? So hopefully this video was a little bit helpful to you, and in terms of how to read a line plot, how to form a line plot, and kind of organize your data into a line plot. It's very, very helpful when you measure a bunch of the same object. That's what you always want to make sure you're doing. You're measuring the same object, but just maybe different kinds or forms of that object. So books is a really good example. So measuring different books that come in all shapes and sizes, right? And then organizing all of the measurements that you find into a little line plot, so that way you can answer questions about, which book was the longest in inches, which one was the shortest in inches, which was the most common sized book that you found. So in this example, 4 inches was the most common because it had the most number of books measuring at 4 inches. So you can answer a whole lot of different questions about your data with the help of a line plot. So nice job today. Hopefully this was helpful to you. I think you can now go on to Think Central and complete the lesson for 8.9. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch these videos and learn about line plots today. And good luck on your math homework. Bye.